I hope this can all be clear that I made the presentation with the help of some colleagues in German, but I will talk through it in English. Vielen Dank für Ihr Verständnis. So, let's first give a brief picture of Fairware Foundation, and then I go into what I think are the key challenges for the industry and explain why I believe collaboration and indeed inclusiveness are key to a new normal for garment workers. I saw our friend of Marco Polo use that phrase, the new normal, and I'm happy to say that indeed for us it's also an important concept. The current normal, what is today normal, should not be normal. So anyway, Fairware, very brief. In a nutshell, we are a multi-stakeholder organization, which means that the industry is equally represented in the board as the labor unions, the trade unions, and the NGOs, the activists, the campaigners. Both are equally in our board, in all our important decisions, in our DNA. And this means that we are not only very credible, but we are also very practical. We show in practice what the new normal can look like. And it is no coincidence that brands like Marco Polo or also Mammut are members of Fairware Foundation. So these are our core labor standards. I'm not going to read them to you. The most important thing is that we completely align with the UN guiding principles, the ILO core conventions, and the OECD due diligence guidelines for the garment and footwear sector. And that's the most important, the gold standard for our sector. I think you probably learned this from Professor Janz already. If you're a student, the OECD due diligence guidelines for the garment and footwear sector are really of excellent quality. We have teams in 11 production countries from Asia to Central Europe, covering most of the garment production for the European market. Our core activities are on the one hand that we guide and support and verify also in the brand performance check. We verify and we help the due diligence of our member brands. Here in the main offices in Europe, in Amsterdam, Berlin, in Zurich, but also there in the production countries, in the factories, in their supply chains. And on the other hand, we engage in policy influencing, lobbying advocacy to push for better regulation, both here in Europe and in production countries. And we aim to engage more of the industry in high due diligence standards. And crucially, we support brands and factories and trade unions, of course, in meaningful social dialogue. And I'll be very happy to go into all of these concepts more based on your questions or when I'm talking with Professor Janz in a moment. But I'm going through it a little bit quickly now, because also I don't know exactly which concepts are new to you or which ones you already know. But social dialogue is a very important concept there. Then, now, that's in a nutshell what we do. We have a history of 20 years. We have around 50 people in Europe and about 50 people in the production countries. So now to the interesting part. I would like to put on the table, maybe also provoking a little bit, the key challenges that I see for this sector, for sustainability, human rights sustainability, social sustainability in this sector. Problems that block us from making sufficient impact, from reaching that new normal. So the first is that there are serious power imbalances throughout the supply chain between workers and employers on the one hand in the factories, but also between brands here and the factories there. And an important reason behind this, and this is a crucial concept in my opinion, is that a very big part, not everything, but a very big part of the garment production is based on low-skilled labor. And this labor can be found pretty much everywhere in developing countries. So if a worker creates trouble or wants more pay, then she can easily be replaced. If a factory tries to improve working conditions and that increases the costs, then you just go to a different factory. Even regions and countries, if, for example, a country decides that the minimum wage is not enough or that there should be a social security system, then the cost will go up, and the factory owners sometimes pick up their bags and go to another country, or the brands switch from factory in one country to a factory in another country, because there is this fungibility, this interchangeability of labor, because it is low skilled. I'm sure it's a bit too simplified, but basically this is true for a big part of the market. So that is, I think, also a key difference with some of the other sectors where it is not so easy to just move your production around, like coffee or tea or even car productions. You can't just pick up your factory and go somewhere else or switch factories from one day to another. These first two bullets, two factors, so the power imbalance and the fungibility of low-skilled labor, lead to a third bullet, which is the discrepancy between power and responsibility. So, although the responsibility for human rights is actually in the due diligence at the European brands just as much as with the factories, and although lots of the problems in the factories are actually caused by bad purchasing practices, bad behavior by the brands, it is in practice the responsibility of the factories to solve the problems. And on the other hand, the factory, as we just discussed, doesn't have the power or the money to change things. So in the end, there is not so much impact. In the end, not so much changes, and the workers continue to be exploited. This is obviously not the case for all the brands and all the factories. I want to be clear. There are wonderful brands, including the Fairway members, who are doing really what they can to have good purchasing practices and good due diligence. And many of them are successful to a certain extent. But the problem is that the fierce competition, especially in the fast fashion side of the market, that was just discussed, but let me not get into that. This fierce competition makes it very difficult for the good ones, the good brands, and to try to do their best. And there's another difference with other sectors, the fragmentation. It's a highly fragmented sector. In other sectors, you can maybe get the top five brands around the table, and then you cover maybe half of the market or even more. But if you look at the garment brands, there are so many that even the top 10 together, the biggest 10 garment brands, they don't have a huge part of the market. They can't control what happens. So there is a lot of competition between many fragmented brands, and at the same time in the factories as well, there are so many factories, too many, that there is overcapacity, that there is production under cost price, that is obviously not good for the workers. And every brand will work with hundreds or even thousands of factories, and every factory will work with dozens of brands. So that fragmentation means that one brand does not have a lot of influence. Even those brands that really want to do a good job, despite the competition that they face, will find it very, very hard to create real change by themselves. So anyway, so now to the solutions. And maybe they're a little bit less far away than you might think after this dark picture of mine. The power imbalances need to be changed. This means stronger trade unions, stronger workers. It means also factory managers who understand that it is in their interest to have good communication with their workers, and factory managers who are able to engage in meaningful social dialogue. It also means factory owners who are able to negotiate better with brands based on long-term, mutually beneficial, respectful relationships. And a lot of brands are doing, well, not enough, but Some brands are doing this very successfully, including several German brands, long-term trusted relationships with their customers. And it's actually in the business interest of the brands as well, as we now saw with COVID, and we've had the CEOs of Taco and the CEOs of Suit Supply saying this. Based on those good relationships, strong relationships, they're positive for social responsibility. You also have a better relationship to get the goods that you want to have, to get the quality and the delivery times that you want to have, despite the problems in the supply chain now in many of the Asian countries especially. Then when there is meaningful social dialogue, this can also help guide brands in prioritizing human rights risks and pinpointing impactful action. So having the voice of workers helps make the due diligence by the brands here in Europe easier and more effective. But we do need the industry, and that's the third bullet, to align, to come together around a shared vision of what is responsible business and what is not responsible business. So this consensus, actually it exists. I think if you ask anyone, I think also today it was quite clear that people are quite aligned on what should happen, but it needs to be explicit, it needs to be operationalized. You have to do something with it. And if we operationalize this shared consensus by speaking the same language and by using each other's tools, like for example, wage calculators or other tools, overtime prevention tools, there are many tools. If we start using those together, then we can tackle this fragmentation problem. To give you a very simple example, before I close, if a brand is responsible for only 10% of the production in a factory and they ask to increase the wages in the factory, and they even want to pay for it, the factory is going to say, well, convince my other 10 customers because they don't want to pay. If you get together with the other 10 customers in a decent way, in a good way, to together with the factory trying to improve the conditions and the pay, then things can actually start to move. Now, this is the basis of an initiative we took this year with ETI, the Ethical Trading Initiative in the UK. It's called the Industry We Want. There's a lot of support from industry leaders from different parts of the industry and the OECD as well. So if you're interested in that, then you can see how we're trying to get the industry together. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much for this interesting insight. I think we have a few minutes to discuss a few questions probably. If you say that they need to have a long-term relationship, the brands together with the factories, does that include also long-term contracts? Let's say that, for example, I say, okay, the next 5 years, 3 years at least, I will work together with you so that there is more trust in it?
Yes, I firmly believe so, although you can always make contracts based on performance. You can always say, you know, if your quality all of a sudden goes down the drain, or if there's a big problem here in the market, of course, there are always exceptions. But I often talk to people who work for brands and they say, yeah, we've been working with this factory for 5 years. So we're really good partners. And then if you ask the factory owner, say, yeah, that's true. But we don't know if they're going to be there tomorrow. Mm. So a long-term relationship is something, a trusted relationship is something that is built on the future as well as the past. And a contract can help there, or at least, you know, a relationship that looks forward together and tries to change things together rather than just looking back, oh, it's already 5 years. That's interesting.
Mm. Yeah, I guess so. But I think it's not really common in the industry, is it? No. To have contracts like that? Yeah.
No, because the brands want to be flexible, and as I said, there is so much, you know, opportunity to go from one country to another, one factory to another. But I also know of companies, big companies even, where, for example, the sourcing staff has as one of the KPIs, the key performance indicators, that the number of years that they are working with the factory. So the longer and better the relationships are, the higher the performance of the team, or the bonus of the team, or the review of the team. Yeah.
Okay, so internal incentives for taking the right decisions.
Absolutely.
And what about the Supply Chain Act, the German Lieferkettengesetz? Do you know about that? Does that help, or what do you think about it?
Yes, I do think. Well, I don't want to get into the details of this particular law because that is quite complex, I would say, and there's not the time.
Of course.
But having such a law is really, really good because it sets this new normal. It says that brands like Marco Polo are not exceptional. That should be the normal. Of course, Marco Polo can still be exceptional, and they can go above and beyond. But at least at the minimum level, and that's already quite a good level. Every brand should do that, so that there is no false competition between the brands that don't care and the brands that do care and do want to make a difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When we look at the countries, isn't it really a big problem that there is not enough regulation in these countries protecting worker rights, things like that? How can we influence the governments of these countries to go in this direction? Is this also part of your job? I think you said
is
at the beginning, yeah, but I think this must be a really difficult job. What are you doing to achieve this?
It is not easy, but there again, talking about the power, of course, it is very useful to talk to the government of Vietnam about their labor laws, and especially how they are put into practice, because often the laws are quite okay, but the practice is not good. But you also have to ask yourself, why is the practice not good? It's not because the people in Vietnam don't want to have good labor conditions for their people. It's not because the government doesn't like the people. It's because they are afraid that the brands will go to another country if they become too expensive, or the workers become too active, or too too involved. So that is an element that's very important to note. So we have to work with brands here as well. And the interesting thing is we can also work with legislation here, because the Lieferkettengesetz that you were just talking about, it actually forces companies to work with partners in countries where the practice is actually good. It's good enough, and also based on their own behavior, but also based on the laws there. Trade agreements, very important too. I just mentioned Vietnam. We now have a trade agreement since 2020, I believe, between Vietnam and the European Union, which gives a lot of benefits to trade between the two parties. But it includes also clear conditions for labor laws in labor practice in Vietnam, but in exchange for lower import tariffs, or so it's worthwhile to do it. That's the kind of thing we need.
So it's the EU who needs to take action, maybe even more action in this field.
Yes, I believe so. The EU will also come with legislation. The Commission already has announced it, human rights due diligence legislation. There is something called the Brussels effect. If you want to look it up sometime, please do. The Brussels effect means that if the EU sets a standard, slowly the whole world will use this standard, because it makes more sense to produce one product for the whole world and not only separate products for Europe. Yep. So that's actually very useful. But it's also the brands. It's not only the laws. It's also the brands that have to participate. And yes, you're totally right. It's also the influencing that we do and many others do in the production countries with the local authorities, labor inspections, etc.
Mm-hmm. And within the EU, do we have problems like this
yes.
also, like Bulgaria, countries like that?
Yes, but also in Italy, for example. Mm-hmm. We have did a risk analysis of Italy. It's on our website. I think it's the beginning of this year, and unfortunately, there's still a lot to be improved there as well. So, and even high-end, very expensive luxury goods made in Italy, the high price and the nice label doesn't always mean that it is good production. It really depends on whereas a company like Taco, for example, or Zeeman, they are very low cost in the shops. They're not good cheese or anything, but they are doing a very, very serious job in human rights due diligence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yesterday I read the report on Taco on your website, and I must really recommend it to all our students to read these reports. You can really learn a lot about what to do to achieve more sustainability in social sustainability. I think it was very interesting because Taco, as you said, very low price, so it was nice to see what they do there.
It is a matter of continuous improvement. We've been working with Taco for 10 years. We're just celebrating that now. There's no such thing as good factories or bad factories. Audits are interesting, but it is doing your due diligence is really about the whole supply chain, looking at your own behavior first and then how you work with your factories. It is absolutely wrong to go for the, let's say, blacklist and green list approach, where you say, I only work with green listed factories and I go out as soon as I see a problem. They put them on the blacklist, and then I am free. I've washed my hands in innocence and I've done my job. That is not what due diligence is about. It's a misinterpretation of the UNGP and the OECD and the ILO guidelines, which unfortunately still is being promoted by many who like audits.
Mm-hmm. So if I understand it correctly, your member companies, they get assessed every year, and then they can develop.
Yes, and actually you can see the points that they're getting. And the funny thing is, if you're getting the same points as last year, then it's not good enough.
Okay.
You have done, no, I should say it differently. It's not good enough. That's not true. Let me say it correctly. If you get the same points as last year, you have done a better job than last year. So doing the same as last year is not enough. Mm-hmm. You always have to continuously improve to stay at the same level or to even improve your level. And it takes time, it takes serious work. I think for you and your students, the CSR work is extremely interesting. It's a wonderful area, fantastic people working there, and more CEOs and top management are seeing that this is not something separate for, somewhere in the back of the factory. No, this is really a core activity because it's better for your own business and for the people in your supply chain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we get more and more requests for bachelor thesis on these subjects, and this from the companies, because all our students are working already. So I think it's really taking up the whole subject. Yeah,
that's very nice.
Yeah. Okay, I think we are at the end of our symposium. Thank you really very much for these insights, and it would be great to keep in touch, maybe meet if you are in Heilbronn here.
I would look forward to that. Yes, very much.
It'd be very interesting for us to keep in touch.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.